Welcome back to Carolina Journal Radio. I'm Mitch Kokai. One of our state's leading school choice organizations has a new leader, and she joins us now to talk about her new role. Lindalyn Kakadelis has taken the job as Executive Director of the North Carolina Coalition for Charter Schools. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We're going to talk a little bit about your background coming into this, but first of all, the North Carolina Coalition for Charter Schools. What is its role in the whole school choice movement?
Okay. We are a C6 organization, which means that every dime of our money goes to advocacy work. We have two main missions. Number one, work for full funding for charter schools. Many people don't realize that a charter school student receives about 73 cents on the dollar that a district student would receive. So, that's a pretty big difference. And then also, charter operators have to pay for operating funds facility, the buildings and the classrooms out of that operating budget. So there's a real disparity in funding. So that's our number one mission, is to try to get fair, just funding for charter school students. And then the second point is we're seeing regulatory creep all the time on charter schools, and we want to stop that. Charter schools need to be innovative. So this is an advocacy organization to stop those two things.
And as a reminder, charter schools are public schools, so it is an apples-to-apples comparison about how much money goes to a traditional district school versus how much goes to a charter school. They're all public schools.
Exactly. Each one has to answer to the State Board of Education. They have to take the same exams. The curriculum can be different. There's a little flexibility to the charter schools, but what's the biggest part of accountability is the parent, the family makes the decision to go to a charter school, and they can cross county lines to go to it. Many folks have misconceived ideas about charter schools. I speak to families all the time. Some of them think they're private schools and have to pay tuition. It's like, no. These are options for every family in the state.
Now, you are new to this role as Executive Director of the North Carolina Coalition for Charter Schools, but you are not new to education in North Carolina, either the school choice movement or the traditional public schools. Tell us a little bit about your background and how that's going to help you in this new role.
Okay. Well, first of all, I was a classroom teacher. And then back in the 90s, I decided to run for school board and ran in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. Served 2 terms on the Charlotte Mecklenburg Board of Education. While serving there, I had a really unique role of managing $3 million of private scholarship money for opportunity for scholarships in the area. It was private money at that time. No one knew about there was no opportunity scholarships, but worked with that scholarship organization. Also was on the board of a charter school while still being on the Charlotte Mecklenburg board. I made a real statement as far as I wanted families to make choices, and I wanted all education providers to be quality.
Now, serving those multiple roles, did you see some of the things that charters could do that traditional district schools would not be able to do?
All the time, Mitch. The charter schools were able to respond quickly to family needs. They didn't have to try to be one size fits all. Yeah, one size fits all. They could meet needs of gifted students. They could meet needs of students that wanted to, spend their curriculum in math and science, or even the arts. So they could specialize in those fields. While your district schools, they're trying to be all things to all people at all locations.
And my guess is that the folks that you work with in the Charlotte Mecklenburg schools, they weren't evil, they weren't out to do bad things, that just the system didn't work well for everyone.
That's exactly right. There are great people in every educational provider. And what we're trying to do is empower families to find the right match for their child.
We are speaking with Lindalyn Kakadelis. She is the new Executive Director of the North Carolina Coalition for Charter Schools. You mentioned the 2 main things that the group is working on. What are some of the ways that you're trying to build interest and knowledge about this funding gap?
Well, we're working with our government relations team on the floor at the General Assembly. Many of the members don't realize the discrepancy. We had back in the late 2000s, there was what they call the Hackney Amendment that came through late one night that took away some of the funding for charter schools. And so we'll be looking at ways of repealing that. And then just educating the general public on the values of charter schools, how that charter schools are saving counties millions of dollars with facilities because the counties don't have to pass bonds to build the facilities for charter schools. So we're going to be two-pronged there, working with the General Assembly, but also doing a messaging campaign across the state.
You also mentioned as another goal the fight against the regulatory creep. Why is it so important that charter schools not have more regulations piled on them year after year?
Well, if they do, they're not going to be any different than your district schools. They will have the same regulations, same curriculum, same pacing guides, et cetera, and the innovation of charter schools will be limited.
One of the other things that we have seen in recent years is ever since the General Assembly lifted that cap on charter schools, there's been a major growth in charter schools. Has that led to some positives, some negatives, some mixed bag, going from slightly less than 100 schools to now almost double that?
What we have learned from that is it takes charter schools a couple of years to get at their pace, to really see that they're exceeding in growth, and for people to learn how to run schools. So it takes a little while for them to get where they want to be. The longer the charter school's been open, the better we see the academic performance, which would make sense. It would make sense. Right now, we're at about a little over 116,000 students across the state, with almost 200 charter schools. And meanwhile, parents and many stakeholders do not realize the fragile nature, the political fragile nature of charter schools and the freedom we have.
You mentioned that fragile nature. I would suspect that one of the things that you're doing is talking to lawmakers who are supporters and those who are opponents and those who are lukewarm about charter schools, and just reminding them what valuable role they play.
Exactly. I don't like to have to say that K-12 education is political, but K-12 education is political.
Shocker.
Elections have consequences. And so we'll be doing a candidate survey, asking candidates their views on charter schools, and then letting the public know what the candidates are saying about that.
In the brief time that we have left, what is your sense of the future for charter schools? Does it look bright? I mean, are we on a good path, or are there some tough obstacles or roadblocks we need to get past?
Well, right now, charter schools, it's been so exciting to see the academic performance of charter schools in subgroups, especially your Black and Hispanic subgroups in elementary, middle, and high school. And what we're seeing is the longer the students are in the schools, the higher their academic performance is. And so we're seeing these gaps in performance start to close, and that's very exciting. I am concerned about the election that's coming up. We've seen, Governor Cooper has not been a real good friend for charter schools. On his Commission for a Sound Basic Education, he didn't appoint one charter school leader. The West Ed report that just came out didn't interview or talk to one charter school leader, all the while mentioning the funding of charter schools and the myth that charter schools are draining money from your district schools. And it's just not so when you start looking at the local government audits and what is being spent per pupil. It's just not true. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in this next election and what we can do as the coalition to educate the voters and educate all the stakeholders involved in charter schools.
Well, one group that is going to be focusing on the truth about charter schools is the North Carolina Coalition for Charter Schools. Its new executive director, Lindalyn Kakadelis. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.